He doesn't want ACAS to become involved in the dispute. And he seemed very well briefed on the document, it seemed to me. He seemed to know the figures. And I'm convinced this is a genuine document. And it doesn't seem like a management that's prepared to negotiate. And what kind of institution is it that treats its workforce like this, which talks about, we've had instances of bullying and harassment at the workplace. Every time we ask for an independent inquiry, we get rebuffed. And tonight, Lord Mandelson rebuffed even ACAS becoming involved in this dispute.
Emily Thornberry, we also heard in this document, which Mr Hayes thinks is genuine, that the shareholder is behind what amounts to a very tough stance. The shareholder is the government.
Well, the shareholder is all of us, and I think if Royal Mail thinks that shareholders think it's a good idea to impose change without bringing the workforce with them, then they're fantasising. The only way in which you can bring forward a proper change in Royal Mail is to do it by agreement. That's good management practice. You can't go imposing it on people. I have a very large sorting office in my constituency. I have a large number of posties. They're really concerned about this. But so are my constituents. I mean, they want to have, a reliable source of mail.
It's all very well to say the shareholder is all of us. That is obviously true in the widest sense. But the people who implement this, the shareholder is behind it, is what the document says. Well, that means the government.
Yeah, I think you're drawing too much from that. I think you're drawing too much from this. The people who are behind it is Royal Mail management.
But they say the shareholder's behind it.
Mad. This is not the way to deal with a dispute. You have to sit down at a table and talk.
They say the shareholder's behind it and the shareholder is the government.
Well, you look at that document and see fingerprints on it. I don't. I see a management.
So the government's not behind the Royal Mail in any way?
Well, of course we own the Royal Mail. We all own the Royal Mail, and obviously...
And not behind the Royal Mail stance.
And there's £60 million which Royal Mail management still have that the government's loaned them. They're supposed to be spending on modernisation. And we really need Royal Mail to be modernised. We need management and unions to sit down and
Neil
talk.
O'Brien, when you see this document, is that the way to manage a union dispute? And also, given what Mr Hayes has said about the business secretary setting his face against ACAS intervention, is that the way to manage union labour disputes in the 21st century?
Well, ultimately, who started this? By calling a national strike, not only has this union caused chaos for normal people, it's also made the fundamental problems faced by the Royal Mail much worse, not better. The Royal Mail will now lose more big clients like Amazon, and the problems facing the business are not just going to go away by calling a big national strike. Ultimately, the internet and email are taking away a ton of the business every year, 10% less letters than this time last year, and the business needs to become smaller and more efficient.
But when management apparently is thinking about withdrawing privileges amounting to £20 million, when the union can say, we have got a mandate for this, and we are normal people, the people who deliver your mail are normal people, and they voted for this strike because they think conditions are intolerable.
Ultimately, the union is resisting change, and that's actually a mistake in the long term, because the truth, if you just let me finish my point.
Okay.
The bottom line is that Royal Mail admits it's 40% less efficient than its continental competitors. That's partly because its costs for labour are 20% higher, according to the Office for National Statistics, than its private sector comparators. It's got incredibly out-of-date technology. Posties in the UK literally spend 3 hours a day sorting mail, and in the continent that would be done by a machine.
It's an resisting change.
There are all kinds of practices that are just decades out of date and need to go.
That's just ridiculous. First of all, postal charges in the UK are half the cost of comparable postal institutions. We're not against modernisation. We want to see a modern Royal Mail. The issue here is, what kind of management do we want in Royal Mail? Do we want a modern management that takes its workforce with us? Or do we want a management that has to have secret documents, talk about not using ACAS, not having an independent inquiry into bullying and harassment, not wanting anybody else? We're quite happy as a CWU to have an independent inquiry, and I'm quite happy to take you to any delivery office and you talk to postwomen and postmen about the conditions they're under. And I would say to them...
Let me, sorry to interrupt there, but just let me ask, because time is limited. Are you serious about disaffiliating from the Labour Party? Is that part of this? You've given £7 million to the Labour Party since 2001. You're a huge donor. Your members, if they are of the mood that you just suggested, will not want to be spending that money on the Labour Party, will they?
The issue is getting this industrial dispute sorted out. We've got a document here that clearly demonstrates that the company, Royal Mail management, do not want a resolution to this dispute. They appear to not want an agreement. And I would say...
But you said the government doesn't want a resolution. The government is run by the Labour Party. Will you disaffiliate from the Labour Party and stop paying the money?
There's a very simple test here in terms of this dispute. We're quite prepared to go to ACAS. Any independent, whether that's independent arbitration
right.
or bullying
made
harassment.
that point, but will you disaffiliate from the Labour Party?
I'm not here to talk about the doings.
But I am. 98% of your members said last month they would like to do so. You postponed that disaffiliation. You've given £7 million to the Labour Party since 2001. Is that a mistake? Will you stop doing it?
I haven't come on this show tonight to talk about the Labour Party. I've come on this show tonight to talk about getting a resolution to this dispute.
So you'll be quite happy to continue to pay them almost £1 million a year, despite the fact that you think that they are not prepared to have you go to ACAS and they are behind as the shareholder this kind of document.
Last month, this Labour Party conference just gone, unanimously Labour Party conference voted for the government to deal with the pension fund deficit. They're the type of Labour Party people who are saying to this government, yes, the Labour government, we want this matter sorted out. And I'd say again, the Business Secretary and the Prime Minister need to say to Royal Mail management, we want an independent inquiry, we want ACAS to come in and solve this particular dispute.
Okay, let's how big a deal do you think this is in terms of industrial relations? I mean, I drew a comparison earlier with the miners' strike. Do you think it's that kind of a big deal in terms of reorganising labour?
I do think this is a very big deal, not only because we've had these wildcat strikes, which are a bad sign, but partly because this is an issue where you've got a business where transformation is decades overdue. The business is bleeding to death at the moment because it's got a £10 billion pension fund deficit. The government offered to underwrite that in exchange for a transformation of the business of the kind that we've seen in other European countries, where they've taken out half of their post centres and they've introduced all kinds of new technologies. But the problem is, by resisting a little bit of change, the union is ultimately crashing the business, and you could all lose your jobs.
Do you agree with the size of that? Even if I know you don't agree with the main political part, but do you agree this is a very, very, very big strike?
I think it's very serious, but I think that I have to say, you know, when there have been 63,000 jobs lost in the last 5 years, there have been changes, and that has been change done by agreement. So I think it's not fair to kind of bandy around, you know, phrases like dinosaurs and so on. I think the only way in which we can get proper change is by sitting down and talking about it. And yes, this could get out of hand. And the Labour Party is not just a few people. The Labour Party is a very large organisation, and the postal workers have support. You know, from the Labour Party, but you know, we also want to make sure that we have a postal service that is worth having, you know, for all of us.
Do you worry that this could be like the miners' strike, that the government and the employer will not back down, and it will cause you huge problems as a union and your workers?
Well, first of all, we had a ballot that got a 76% yes vote, and it's supported by our members. That's the first thing. The second thing is mail volumes are increasing in the run-up to Christmas. So, you know, the comparison, I think the comparisons don't make sense. And the thing about this strike is that we're interested in compromise. And, you know, the post office is a great British institution, and compromise is a great British solution. And what we seem to have here is a management that doesn't seem to want to compromise and doesn't seem to want to go to ACAS, and I find that incredible.